What if the breakup that shattered you was never meant to be real? What if the person you loved didn't leave because they were done, but because they wanted to test you? This story starts with a phone call. No yelling, no cheating, no obvious red flags. Just 4 words. We need to talk. He said I didn't fight for him enough, that I didn't chase, that I didn't prove I cared. So I did something no one expected. I accepted the breakup, I walked away, I moved on. And that's when everything exploded. Because the breakup wasn't a breakup at all. It was a setup, designed by his friends to see if I'd beg, panic, or fall apart. I didn't. Instead, I failed the test and accidentally triggered a chain reaction that exposed manipulation, entitlement, and a second betrayal I never saw coming. By the end of this story, I lost 2 relationships, not because I wasn't loving enough, but because 2 different men thought playing games was a valid way to keep control. If you've ever been told you didn't fight hard enough, if you've ever felt punished for respecting someone's decision, if you've ever wondered whether walking away quietly was a mistake, stay with me. Because sometimes the most powerful move you can make is refusing to play the game at all. I didn't lose my relationship because I wasn't loving enough. I lost it because I refused to audition for a role I never agreed to play. 3 weeks ago, I was in my kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, staring at a half-opened cabinet like I'd forgotten what I was looking for when my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. My stomach tightened before I even answered. We need to talk. Every woman knows that sentence doesn't come with relief. His voice was controlled, not angry, not emotional, just distant. He said he thought we should break up, like it was a scheduling conflict, like we were canceling dinner, not dismantling 2 years of shared routines, future plans, inside jokes that only worked between us. I asked why. My voice stayed steady, but my fingers dug into the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. He said I didn't fight for him enough, that I didn't chase him, that I didn't prove I cared. For a moment, I genuinely wondered if we were talking about the same relationship. I had driven hours to help him when things fell apart. I rearranged my life around his schedule. I showed up consistently, quietly, without theatrics. Apparently, that was the problem. That's just baseline, he said. I want passion. What he wanted, what he didn't say out loud, was for me to panic, to beg, to plead, to promise I'd change myself into someone more dramatic, more desperate, more entertaining. And here's where everything split in 2. I didn't do it. I told him if that's what he wanted, I respected his decision. I told him goodbye. My heart was pounding, loud enough I could hear it in my ears, but my voice didn't crack. When the call ended, the silence felt violent. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, replaying every conversation, every compromise, every moment I thought we were building something real. Then I did what women are rarely applauded for doing. I walked away clean. I blocked his number, deleted him from my social media, packed up the things he'd left at my place, and sealed the box like a chapter I refused to reopen. What I didn't know, what no one bothered to tell me, was that the breakup wasn't real. It was a test, a setup designed by his friends to see if I'd fight harder. And without realizing it, I'd already failed. Not because I didn't love him, but because I refused to chase someone who chose to leave. I thought the breakup was the painful part. I had no idea the real damage was just getting started. I met him in the most unremarkable way possible, which is probably why it worked for as long as it did. There was no lightning strike, no dramatic first impression. We were introduced through mutual friends at a casual group hangout, one of those nights where people drift in and out of conversations, drinks get refilled without ceremony, and no one expects their life to pivot. He was easy to talk to, not loud, not performative. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it felt measured, thoughtful. At the time, that felt safe. We started dating slowly. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekends that quietly blended into each other. He texted consistently. He showed up when he said he would. There was comfort in that rhythm. After a while, I stopped bracing for disappointment because there wasn't any, not obviously, at least. For 2 years, we built something that looked solid from the outside. We had routines, certain nights of the week that were ours, shared jokes that made no sense to anyone else, half-formed plans about moving in together next spring. Nothing extravagant, just normal life unfolding one step at a time. And I liked that. I'd had relationships before where intensity masqueraded as intimacy, where chaos passed for passion. With him, things were calmer. I cooked. He handled errands. We supported each other in practical ways. When something went wrong, we talked about it. At least I thought we did. Looking back now, I can see the cracks. They were small, almost invisible, but they were there. Sometimes he'd comment on other couples, the way the guy just knew what to do, the way some women never had to ask for effort because it was instinctive. I assumed it was idle talk, romantic ideals. I didn't realize he was quietly measuring me against a standard that required mind reading. If I didn't anticipate a need before he voiced it, he'd withdraw slightly. Not enough to start a fight, just enough to make me feel like I'd missed something. I learned to compensate by being more attentive, more available, more flexible. I told myself that was compromise, not erosion. We rarely argued. That should have been a warning. Instead of conflict, there was silence. Instead of direct dissatisfaction, there were hints. I'd ask if something was wrong, and he'd say no. Then later, he'd say I should have known. Still, I believed we were stable. I believed consistency meant security. When he talked about the future, I listened. When we planned things months ahead, I trusted those plans meant commitment. I didn't realize that to him, consistency wasn't enough. He wanted pursuit. He wanted to feel wanted in a way that required imbalance. He wanted proof that if he pulled away, I would chase. But I don't chase people who are actively leaving. That difference in values, the quiet expectation versus the loud demand, was already there long before the breakup call. I just didn't recognize it for what it was. I thought love was built through mutual effort. He thought love was proven through resistance. And somewhere between those two definitions, the relationship was already breaking, long before he ever said the words out loud. The first warning signs didn't arrive as red flags. They came disguised as comments, pauses, expectations that were never spoken out loud. It started subtly. A shift in tone when I didn't react the way he expected. A sigh when I didn't ask the right follow-up question. He never raised his voice, never accused me directly. Instead, he'd say things like, "I guess it's fine," in a way that made it clear it wasn't. At first, I blamed myself. I told myself relationships required adjustment, that maybe I was too literal, too practical. When he'd mentioned how other women surprised their partners or instinctively knew what they needed, I took it as a hint, not a criticism. So I adjusted. I became more attentive. I checked in more often. I learned to scan his moods the way you read weather, watching for pressure changes, preparing for storms that might never come but always felt possible. I tried to anticipate needs before they became disappointments. But the goalposts kept moving. If I planned something thoughtful, it was appreciated, but briefly. Then it became the new baseline. If I didn't repeat it, it counted against me. Passion, in his definition, wasn't consistency. It was escalation. And escalation is exhausting. There were moments I'd catch a look on his face, something between frustration and expectation, when I didn't react dramatically enough, when I didn't protest strongly enough during a minor disagreement, when I didn't fight. "You're too calm," he said once, half joking. I laughed it off. "Is that a bad thing?" He didn't answer. His friends started appearing more in our conversations then, offhand mentions of what they thought, what they'd advised, how they always told each other to never settle. I didn't think much of it at the time. Everyone talks to their friends. Everyone vents. What I didn't know was that those conversations weren't just commentary. They were strategy sessions. He'd come back from hanging out with them slightly different, more distant, more evaluative, like he was watching me instead of being with me. Sometimes he'd pull away emotionally for no clear reason, then act surprised when I noticed. "You didn't even ask if something was wrong," he'd say later. "I didn't know something was wrong," I'd reply. And that was the problem. He didn't want to tell me. He wanted me to prove I cared by sensing it, by chasing the silence, by refusing to let him go, even when he was the one creating distance. I didn't grow up believing love worked that way. To me, respect meant listening when someone spoke clearly. Boundaries mattered. If someone said they were fine, I believed them. If someone said they wanted space, I gave it. But to him, those responses felt like indifference. The irony was brutal. The more stable I was, the more he questioned my commitment. The more I respected his autonomy, the more he interpreted it as a lack of desire. By the time the breakup conversation happened, the narrative had already been written in his head. I just hadn't been given a copy. He was waiting to see if I'd break character, if I'd panic, chase, beg. And without realizing it, the relationship had already become a test. I just didn't know I was being graded. The call came on an ordinary day, which somehow made it worse. I was in my kitchen, mid-task, holding a box of pasta I hadn't opened yet, mentally calculating what I still needed from the store. Life was moving forward in small, forgettable steps, until my phone rang. His name on the screen. When I answered, his voice was serious, too deliberate, not rushed, not emotional, controlled. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped instantly. Not because he sounded upset, but because he sounded prepared. "What's going on?" I asked. There was a pause, just long enough to make my chest tighten. "I think we should break up." The world didn't explode. The floor didn't give out beneath me. Instead, everything went quiet, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I stood there, frozen, gripping the pasta box like it might anchor me to something real. "Okay," I said finally, because my brain was lagging behind my ears. "Can I ask why?" Another pause, then he said it. "I don't think you're invested enough." I blinked. "What?" "You don't fight for us," he continued. "You never chase me. I need someone who shows they care." For a second, I genuinely wondered if this was a joke I wasn't in on. "I drove 4 hours last month when your car broke down," I said slowly. "I cook dinner multiple times a week. I show up. What are you talking about?" "That's baseline, Tit," he replied. "I need passion. I need someone who won't just let me walk away." There it was. The expectation laid bare. He wanted resistance. He wanted fear. He wanted me to scramble. I could feel my heart pounding, my pulse loud in my ears, but something else rose up with it. Clarity. Not anger, not panic, just a steady understanding of what he was asking me to become. I could have begged. I could have asked what he needed me to change. I could have promised to be louder, needier, more reactive. I could have played the role he was clearly auditioning me for. But I didn't. "I'm 29, I said quietly. "I'm too old for games." Silence. "All right then," I continued, "if that's what you want." That was it. No speech, no bargaining. "You're not even going to try?" he asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. "You just told me you want to break up." "You told me you want to break up," I replied. "I'm respecting your decision." "But don't you care?" "Of course I care," I said. "I just won't beg someone to stay who doesn't want to." He went quiet again. "Fine," he said eventually. "I guess that proves my point." "I guess it does," I answered. "Take care of yourself." "You too." The call ended. I stood there for a full minute, unmoving, like my body needed time to catch up with what had just happened. Then I sat down on the edge of the counter, heart racing, hands trembling now that the moment was over. After that minute passed, something else clicked into place. I blocked his number, deleted him from my social media, boxed up the things he'd left at my place, shirts, chargers, a hoodie that still smelled like his cologne, and sealed the box shut. No dramatic music, no tears, just a clean, decisive ending. I told myself that was closure. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a DM on Instagram. It was from one of his friends, a guy I'd met a handful of times at group hangouts. Friendly, easygoing, the kind of person who blended into the background without ever causing friction. "Hey," he wrote, "I heard about you and him. That really sucks. You doing okay?" I stared at the message longer than I probably should have. Part of me hesitated, not because it felt inappropriate, but because everything still felt raw, still unfinished. "I'm okay," I finally replied, "just processing." We talked a bit, nothing heavy. He was sympathetic in a straightforward way. No dramatics, no probing questions. Just normal. He cracked a joke about breakups turning grocery shopping into emotional minefields. I laughed for the first time in days. Then he suggested grabbing coffee. "Just to get you out of your head for an hour," he said. No pressure. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a surprisingly easy night. He was smart, relaxed, grounded. He talked about his work, his projects, the things he cared about without trying to impress me. There was no tension, no performance, just conversation that flowed. As we were leaving the restaurant, he slowed his steps. "I should probably tell you something," he said. "I've kind of had a thing for you since we met. I know the timing's weird." I appreciated the honesty. "The timing is weird," I said truthfully, "but I had a good time tonight." "Me too." We kept seeing each other. A week later, it felt right. Unexpected, but not forced. Like something that wasn't supposed to happen yet, but did anyway. I remember thinking briefly that maybe my ex had done me a favor. That thought didn't last, because what I didn't know, what no one had told me, was that my breakup had never been real. It was supposed to be a test. And by moving forward instead of chasing backward, I'd walked straight into the fallout. The truth didn't arrive as a confrontation. It arrived as a confession. Quiet, awkward, and already too late. A week after we started seeing each other, he came over one evening, looking tense, in a way that had nothing to do with me. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw set, like he'd been carrying something heavy all day and was finally ready to put it down. "We need to talk," he said. The phrase hit differently this time. Not like a threat, but like a warning. Okay, I said, bracing myself anyway. He exhaled slowly. Your ex has been blowing up my phone. My stomach tightened. About what? About you, about me, about everything. He shook his head. He's calling me a snake, a backstabber, saying I planned this, that I stole you. I stared at him, disbelief spreading through me like cold water. Why would he think that? He hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. Because, he said carefully, apparently the breakup wasn't supposed to be real. I blinked. What? It was a test, he continued. His friends convinced him to break up with you to see if you'd fight for him, to prove you really loved him. For a moment, I honestly thought he was joking. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A short, disbelieving sound that came out before I could stop myself. You're serious? Dead serious. I leaned back against the counter, trying to process the sheer absurdity of it. All that pain, all that silence, all that self-control I'd had to summon over something that was never meant to end. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. He broke up with me to see if I'd beg. Yes. And now he's furious because I didn't. Yes. And instead I moved on. He nodded. With me. The room felt suddenly too small, too quiet. He thinks I orchestrated it, he added, that I suggested the breakup so I could swoop in. Did you? I asked, meeting his eyes. No. His answer was immediate, firm. I suggested coffee because I genuinely thought you were cool and wanted to get to know you better. I didn't know about the test until today, when he started screaming at me about it. I believed him, not because I wanted to, but because everything about how we'd come together had felt organic, unplanned, easy. Who does that? I muttered. Who turns a relationship into an experiment? Someone who plays stupid games, he said quietly, and wins stupid prizes. We sat with that for a moment. I feel bad, he admitted. He's one of my oldest friends, but this is insane. It is, I agreed. And for the first time since the breakup, I felt something solid settle in my chest. Not regret, not guilt, but certainty. I'm not ending something real, I said, because my ex decided to test me like I'm a character in a romance novel. He nodded. So, we keep dating? Yes, I said, we do. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, the fallout escalated. My ex created a group chat with all of his friends, including the guy I was seeing. The title was Intervention. It was almost impressive in its audacity. At 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, the messages started pouring in. We need to talk about what's happening. This is not okay. She's his ex. There's a code. Then another message popped up from one of the friends. You literally told him to break up with her. That one made me pause. Not everyone was on his side. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered before I thought better of it. Why are you doing this to me? His voice, immediate, accusatory. I'm not doing anything to you, I said evenly. You broke up with me. Because I thought you'd fight for me, he snapped. Not move on in 2 seconds. It's been 3 weeks, I said. And you told me you wanted someone who chased you. I told you I wasn't that person. I didn't mean it, he said. It was supposed to make you realize what you'd lose. The manipulation was so blatant it almost stunned me into silence. That's not how breakups work, I said finally. You don't end a relationship as a test and then get angry when someone takes you seriously. He accused. I stayed calm. He blamed my current boyfriend. I reminded him that he made the choice. By the time I hung up and blocked that number, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was done. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because once the truth came out, the chaos didn't settle. It multiplied. I thought I was prepared for backlash. I wasn't. What started as uncomfortable messages turned into something relentless, like a slow leak that suddenly burst and flooded everything in its path. Once my ex realized I wasn't coming back, wasn't begging, wasn't wavering, the tone shifted. Confusion curdled into anger, anger into entitlement. The group chat didn't stop. Screenshots started circulating, messages dissected, narratives rewritten in real time. According to him, I hadn't just moved on. I had betrayed an unspoken code. I was cold, calculated, heartless. Conveniently, the part where he initiated the breakup as a test was framed as a misunderstanding. A joke taken too seriously. A harmless experiment that I had apparently failed on purpose. I watched it all from the outside, like observing a storm through glass. Then my phone rang again. A different number this time. I answered out of habit, regretted it immediately. Hello? This is his mother. Her voice was clipped, formal, carrying the kind of authority that expected compliance simply by existing. I think you owe my son an apology, she said. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was so complete it bordered on surreal. For what exactly? I asked. For stringing him along, she replied, without hesitation, and then immediately dating one of his friends. Do you have any idea how humiliated he is? I closed my eyes, took a breath, grounded myself. Ma'am, I said carefully, your son broke up with me. As a test. I didn't know it was a test because I'm not a mind reader. I took him at his word and moved on. He made a mistake, she said dismissively. Young people do that. You should be more forgiving. I'm not angry, I replied. I just don't want to date someone who plays games. We're incompatible. There was a sharp pause on the line. I think you're being very immature about this, she said. I respect your opinion, I answered evenly. Have a good day. I hung up, blocked the number. My blocked contacts list was growing fast. That night, I talked everything through again with the man I was currently seeing. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, knees angled toward each other, the space between us filled with something heavy but honest. I feel guilty, he admitted, like maybe we should slow down, or take a step back until the drama dies down. I studied his face. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't pressuring me. He was asking. Do you want to? I asked. No, he said immediately, then hesitated, but I also don't want to be the reason your ex spirals. He's spiraling because his plan backfired, I said. That's not on you, or me. We agreed to keep dating, but quietly. No posts, no public displays, just normal life under the radar until things cooled off. They didn't. 2 weeks later, I learned that escalation doesn't always come louder. Sometimes it comes closer. I was out one evening with friends at a familiar bar, my usual spot, somewhere I'd gone for years. I was mid-conversation, laughing at something trivial, when the energy in the room shifted. I felt it before I saw him. My ex stood near the entrance, scanning the room like he already knew exactly where I'd be. He locked eyes with me and walked straight over, cutting through the crowd with purpose. We need to talk, he said, standing far too close. No, we don't, I replied. Please, 5 minutes. I could feel eyes on us, my friends watching. I didn't want a scene. Not there. Fine, I said, outside. The night air hit us like a reset, but it didn't calm him. The moment the door closed behind us, his composure cracked, not into tears, but into desperation. I miss you, he said. I made a huge mistake. There's nothing to talk about, I replied. Yes, there is, he insisted. We were good together. We had plans. We did, I said, and then you ended it. I explained why, he said quickly. It was supposed to bring us closer. I stared at him, incredulous. Do you hear yourself? I asked. You broke up with me as a relationship test. That's manipulative. I wouldn't ever do something like that again, he said. Right, I replied. Just like you'd never show up here after I blocked you. He didn't have an answer. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said finally, my voice calm but firm. But it's not me. We're done because of him, he shot back. No, I corrected. We're done because of you. Because you listened to bad advice and made a bad choice. Own it. I went back inside. He left. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. 3 days later, my phone rang again, this time from the man I was seeing. His voice was low, controlled, not shaking, but tight in a way that told me he was choosing his words carefully. He showed up at my place this morning, he said. My blood went cold. Your apartment? Yes. A pause. He was angry, loud, banging on the door. I didn't open it. Did he threaten you? No, he said. Not directly. A neighbor stepped in, told him to leave, or the police would be called. He left. There was no hysteria in his voice, no spiraling fear, just contained tension, like someone assessing a situation instead of collapsing under it. I filed a report, he continued. They said unless he makes a direct threat, there's not much they can do yet. Suggested documenting everything, possibly a restraining order if it continues. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself. You did the right thing, I said. I know, he replied. I just wanted you to be aware. I'm not scared, but I'm not ignoring this either. That distinction mattered. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. You turned him against me. Hope you're happy with your home-wrecking boyfriend. I didn't respond. I screenshot it, added it to the file, blocked the number, and even then, I still didn't realize the next blow wouldn't come from my ex at all. It would come from the person who had positioned himself as the calm in the middle of the storm. The moment everything finally broke wasn't loud. There was no yelling, no slammed doors, no dramatic confrontation in public. It happened quietly, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, exactly the way real damage usually does. We were having lunch together, nothing fancy, just a familiar place, a familiar table, sunlight cutting across the edge of the booth. He was quieter than usual, not withdrawn, just focused inward, like he was weighing something carefully. Then he stopped eating. "I need to tell you something," he said. My stomach dropped instantly. That sentence never arrives alone. It always brings something with it. "Okay," I said, already bracing myself. He didn't rush, didn't panic. He looked at me directly, steady but serious. "When I suggested we get coffee after your breakup," he said slowly, "I did know something was going on." The noise of the restaurant faded. Plates, voices, everything blurred into a dull hum. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Not that it was a test," he clarified quickly. "I didn't know the details, but I knew his friends had been pushing him to do something dramatic, to shake things up." I stared at him, my pulse thudding hard in my ears. "You knew they were planning something," I said. "Yes. And you didn't think that mattered?" He exhaled. "I didn't think it changed how I felt about you." The words landed wrong. Not cruel, but careless. "You waited," I said quietly. "You waited for him to break up with me." "It's not like that," he said immediately. "I genuinely liked you. I still do." "But you saw an opening," I said, "and you took it." He didn't argue that. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "I didn't think it would spiral like this." The silence between us stretched. I felt it in my chest, heavy and unmistakable. Everything clicked into place all at once. The test had been stupid. My ex had been manipulative. But this was different. This wasn't a game fueled by insecurity. This was opportunism. "You knew I was vulnerable," I said, "and you moved in anyway." "That's not fair," he said, his voice controlled but strained. "Everything between us is real." "I'm sure it feels real to you," I replied, "but honesty is the baseline, and you didn't give me that." He looked away, jaw tight, not breaking down, just cornered. "I'm sorry," he said. "I really am." I nodded slowly. "I need time." "Please don't break up with me," he said. Not pleading, asking. "We're good together." I didn't answer. I left the restaurant, got into my car, and drove with no destination for almost an hour. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside something was collapsing with frightening precision. Two relationships, two different men, same pattern. One tested my love, the other took advantage of the test. By the time I got home, I already knew the truth I'd been avoiding. That night I sent a single text. "I can't do this. You weren't honest with me from the beginning. I need someone I can trust, and that's not you." My phone rang almost immediately. I didn't answer. A message followed. "Please let me explain. I made a mistake. We're good together. Don't throw this away." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then blocked his number. And just like that, I was single again. Not because I was unlovable, not because I failed some invisible test, but because two different men believed that manipulation, emotional or strategic, was an acceptable substitute for honesty. That realization hurt more than either breakup, because it meant the problem had never been my effort. It had been my tolerance. And that was finally gone. Ending things with him should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm, surveying the wreckage and realizing how much damage had been done quietly, piece by piece, while I was busy trying to stay composed. For the first time in weeks, there was no one calling. No one demanding explanations. No one insisting I'd misunderstood their intentions. The silence was unfamiliar and strangely heavy. Then my phone buzzed. It was a long message from my ex. I didn't open it at first. I stared at the notification, the preview line already dripping with self-justification, and felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not dread, but resolve. When I finally read it, it was exactly what I expected. He wrote about how this proved he'd been right all along, about how the man I'd been seeing had shown his true colors, about how everything that happened only confirmed that we were meant to be together, that the chaos was a sign, that the universe was correcting itself. I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I typed a single word. "No." Then I blocked the number. It felt definitive in a way nothing else had. A few days later, I ran into him at the grocery store. I saw him first, standing near the produce section, staring at his phone like it was an anchor. When he looked up and spotted me, I watched recognition flash across his face. He took a step toward me, then stopped. We stood there for a moment, the distance between us filled with everything that had already been said and everything that never needed to be. I turned my cart around and walked away. No confrontation, no closure conversation. Just absence. That should have been enough. It wasn't. Later that evening, a text came through from a new number. "I saw you today. You look good. I miss you." I forwarded it to the officer handling my report. Then I blocked the number. The next call wasn't from him. It was from one of his friends, the same one who'd messaged in the group chat weeks earlier, the one who had finally admitted the truth. He apologized. He said he should have spoken up sooner, that he'd felt uncomfortable watching the situation unfold but hadn't wanted to get involved. I appreciate the honesty, I said, but I'm not interested in staying connected to that group. He understood. Apparently, his friend group had fractured. Half believed I was cruel for moving on. Half believed both men had earned exactly what they got. I didn't care which side they landed on. My actual friends were steady, supportive, uninterested in dramatizing what had already been exhausting enough. One of them joked, "You dodged 2 bullets." Another sent me a playlist titled "Trust No One." It was funny in the bleak way only friends who know you well can manage. Work became my refuge. What followed wasn't dramatic in the way movies like to portray consequences. There were no grand apologies, no sudden realizations. No one sat me down and admitted fault. Instead, consequences unfolded quietly, through distance, reputation, and the slow collapse of narratives that couldn't survive scrutiny. Once I stopped responding entirely, my ex pivoted. Not inward, outward. He began telling anyone who would listen that he'd been right all along, that everything that happened proved I was impulsive, that I jumped from one relationship to another, that he'd been betrayed, not by the breakup, but by my refusal to wait for him to change his mind. The irony was exhausting. He never mentioned the test, never mentioned that the breakup was engineered, never mentioned that I had simply taken him at his word. But stories have a way of correcting themselves. The full version of events circulated quietly, passed between people who compared screenshots, timelines, and messages. Not everyone accepted his version. Some questioned it openly, others withdrew without explanation. Friendships fractured. Not because I demanded loyalty, but because dishonesty is heavy, and people eventually feel its weight. One of the clearest signs of fallout came when his own circle began shrinking. Invitations stopped. Conversations cooled. People didn't confront him. They simply stopped engaging. The kind of social consequence that doesn't announce itself but leaves a noticeable absence. I didn't celebrate it. I barely acknowledged it. I was busy living my life without chaos. Meanwhile, attempts to contact me continued, sporadic, increasingly desperate, routed through new numbers and indirect channels. I treated them all the same way. Screenshot timestamp save. Not to respond. Not to escalate. Just to document. When the officer handling my earlier report reviewed the pattern, he was clear. Continued contact would meet the threshold for a restraining order. That knowledge alone shifted something. The messages stopped. Not because of understanding, but because consequence finally became tangible. In parallel, the second fallout unfolded more quietly. The man I'd ended things with after learning the truth didn't try to reinsert himself into my life. He called once. I didn't answer. He sent one message. I didn't respond. And that was that. No smear campaign, no dramatic apology tour, just silence. I later learned, through mutual acquaintances, that his best friend had cut him off. Said he couldn't support someone who'd knowingly manipulated a situation like that. Said trust mattered more than attraction. I hadn't asked for that. I didn't need to. The pattern was becoming undeniable, to everyone but the people at its center. My world, meanwhile, stabilized. Work remained steady. Friends stayed present. My days no longer revolved around anticipating reactions or defending decisions. I wasn't explaining myself anymore. That was the biggest shift, because fallout isn't always about things blowing up. Sometimes it's about things no longer holding. The narratives collapsed. The justifications failed. The people who thrived on drama were left talking to themselves. And I moved forward, not loudly, not ceremoniously, but decisively. By the time silence settled for good, it wasn't emptiness. It was closure without conversation. And that, I realized, was the cleanest ending I was ever going to get. It's been a month now, long enough for the chaos to feel distant, but not so long that I've forgotten how disorienting it was to live inside it. Life didn't transform overnight. There was no cinematic reset, no sudden sense of triumph. What there was instead was quiet. Predictable mornings, evenings that belonged to me again. Space where anxiety used to sit. I stayed single, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Dating, for now, feels like navigating a minefield. Everyone seems to carry unspoken expectations, unresolved wounds, or friends whispering advice that should have stayed unspoken. I wasn't interested in auditioning for anyone's fantasy or proving my worth through endurance. So I focused on myself. I picked up woodworking, built a bookshelf that only wobbles a little, started running in the mornings, slowly, deliberately, learning how to move forward without urgency. I read books I'd been meaning to read for years. I slept better. My mom called one afternoon, checking in the way mothers do when they've heard just enough to worry. "You doing okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said honestly, "I am." "You deserve someone who doesn't play games." I laughed softly. "I'm starting to think those people don't exist." "They do," she said. "You just don't rush them." Maybe she's right. Maybe she isn't. Either way, I'm not in a hurry to find out. A few people asked if I regretted how I handled everything, if I wished I'd fought harder, explained more, pushed back. I don't. I could have been messier. I could have aired everything publicly. I could have chased closure or revenge or validation. But what would that have given me? They're dealing with their own consequences, lost friendships, damaged trust, narratives that no longer hold up when examined too closely. That's punishment enough. I walked away clean. No shouting matches, no public spectacle, no bridges burned that I wanted to keep. Just 2 relationships that ended because the men involved believed manipulation, emotional or strategic, was an acceptable substitute for honesty. That wasn't my failure. Here's what I learned. Anyone who tests your love doesn't actually want partnership. They want performance. Anyone who waits for you to be vulnerable before making their move isn't brave. They're opportunistic. People will always tell stories that cast themselves as the victim. That doesn't make those stories true. And walking away, quietly, decisively, without explanation, isn't weakness. It's self-respect. I'm single, slightly more cautious, definitely wiser, building bookshelves, running at dawn, living my life. If the people who tried to turn my heart into a game want to stay stuck replaying choices they made, that's their problem. I'm good. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for staying with me. Stories like this aren't just about breakups or drama. They're about boundaries, about recognizing when love quietly turns into a test you never agreed to take and having the strength to walk away without turning it into a spectacle. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you've ever been told you didn't fight hard enough, or felt pressured to prove your worth through pain, you're not alone, and you're not wrong for choosing self-respect over performance. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been tested in a relationship? Would you have reacted differently? Drop a comment below. Your story might help someone else realize they're not imagining the red flags. If you found this story meaningful, please like the video. It really helps the channel reach more people who might need to hear this message. Subscribe if you want more real-life relationship stories, deep dives into emotional dynamics, and lessons we usually learn the hard way. And if you know someone who's stuck chasing clarity from people who thrive on confusion, share this with them. Until next time, take care of yourself, trust your instincts, and remember, real love doesn't require tests. See you in the next story. I poured myself into a project I'd been avoiding, stayed late, focused, got praised by my boss for my dedication. It was strange how heartbreak sharpened my productivity. At home, I did something small but symbolic. I packed up everything from both relationships, clothes, gifts, notes I'd never reread. I donated most of it. Bought new sheets, new coffee mugs, rearranged the furniture. It felt like reclaiming space, physically and mentally. I started therapy. My therapist listened, fascinated by the symmetry of it all, a perfect storm of manipulation and poor boundaries. She asked if there had been red flags I'd ignored. With my ex, yes. His expectation that I should anticipate his needs without him communicating them. His belief that love required performance. With the second man, the red flag was obvious in hindsight, how quickly he moved in after the breakup. I'd been hurt and flattered, too vulnerable to question it. The realization didn't break me. It clarified me, because the turning point wasn't when I left. It was when I stopped explaining myself to people who benefited from misunderstanding me. That was the moment I took my power back. And I didn't need an audience to do it.